There are decisions that seem minor but secretly chip away at years of your life. Things people buy, convinced they're solving a problem, when in reality, they're unknowingly signing up for a quiet commitment to failure. And the curious thing is, almost no one realizes it. Have you ever noticed how some purchases happen precisely when we're most tired, frustrated, or insecure? And then, a few weeks later, we ask ourselves, why did I even do that? Today, I want to uncover something many people actively avoid confronting. It might feel uncomfortable to face, but once understood, it can profoundly transform anyone's financial future. You might imagine your biggest financial risks lurk in monumental decisions, like buying a new home or trading in your car. But the true danger isn't there. It surfaces in the small, automatic choices you make without even noticing. These are purchases of $30 here, $70 there, $150 somewhere else, all fueled by emotions you'd rather not acknowledge. And ironically, it's precisely in these moments that your mind tries to convince you it's urgent, deserved, or absolutely necessary. Have you noticed how, when you're tired or frustrated, everything suddenly seems justifiable? The big issue isn't money itself, but the emotional weight behind every impulsive decision. Mindless buying becomes a way to numb feelings, and this anesthetic comes at a steep price. What truly hurts isn't the financial loss. It's the guilt that surfaces afterward, the feeling of being out of control, the silent regret that lingers. And the more you try to alleviate that discomfort by buying something new, the larger it grows. Research indicates that most impulsive decisions occur when you're utterly exhausted. It sounds counterintuitive, but the more fatigued you become, the more you convince yourself you deserve something you don't actually need. This fleeting, small reward creates a powerful illusion, as if, for a few minutes, everything is under control. But deep down, you know it isn't. The emotional impact far outlasts the pleasure of the purchase. Just observe your own behavior. How many times have you bought something that seemed to make perfect sense at the time, only for it to completely lose its appeal later? Something you don't even use today? And how often have you concocted logical justifications to disguise what was, at its core, a purely emotional decision? If you're honest with yourself, you can likely recall numerous instances like these. There is, however, an extremely simple practice that can change this pattern. Before buying anything over $50, state aloud why you're making the purchase. It might seem odd, but it works. When you verbalize, you hear yourself. And when you hear yourself, it becomes much harder to continue lying to yourself. If you realize you're buying out of sadness, anxiety, loneliness, or social pressure, postpone it for 48 hours. Most people find that the urge simply vanishes. A famous case strikingly illustrates this. During his career, a renowned investor made a significant decision driven solely by the fear of being left behind by his peers. There was no financial logic involved, only emotional comparison. That decision led to loss, regret, and a profound lesson. When emotion takes control, the decision is weak. And weak decisions come at a high cost, in ways you only realize later. Now, reflect on yourself. How many financial decisions have you made purely because you wanted to feel something different in that moment? How many times have you bought something to prove a point to someone? How many times have you used money as a remedy for bad days? These questions might feel uncomfortable, but they're essential. Because when you start observing what you feel before buying, everything changes. Suddenly, you realize that most impulsive purchases had nothing to do with necessity. They had everything to do with emotion. And when you learn to resist, you begin to feel something rare: clarity. It's like lifting a veil from your eyes. You buy less, spend less, regret less, and curiously, live more. It's not about deprivation. It's about reclaiming a control you didn't even realize you'd lost. And here's an important challenge: simple, yet profoundly transformative. For the next 2 weeks, Record every purchase over $20 and write down exactly how you felt at that moment. Don't analyze, don't judge, just record. At the end of the period, review it. This exercise is so powerful because it's not someone else telling you what's wrong. It's you seeing your own patterns. And once you see it for yourself, you can no longer ignore it. Most people don't have a financial problem. They have an emotional one. And resolving that problem is true freedom. It doesn't start when you earn more. It starts when you understand why you buy. It starts when you confront what you're feeling before you decide. It starts precisely at the point you've always tried to avoid. You might not have noticed how sometimes you feel like you're doing everything right, yet life seems to keep you trapped in the same cycle. As if you take 10 steps forward and without realizing it, fall back 8 steps. This is the second danger almost no one recognizes. You fall into a pattern of financial decisions that seem small and harmless, but which, combined, create a kind of cage that prevents you from moving forward. And the worst part is you don't even notice when this cage is being built. Imagine those moments when you think, I work so hard. Why does it still feel like money disappears so quickly? Or that feeling of seeing someone close to you prospering while you feel like you're running in place. This doesn't happen because you lack ability. It happens because often you repeat a financial habit that was never truly yours, but one you absorbed throughout your life. Perhaps from family, your upbringing, people you admire, or even social pressure that dictates what success should look like. And when you follow this invisible script, you lose control of your own story. A study from Harvard University shows that 80% of people maintain financial habits based solely on what they observed during childhood, even if those habits make no sense for adult life. This means you could be repeating old patterns without even realizing it. And how can you achieve something new using outdated tools? Now think for a moment. How many times have you said you were going to save money only for an emergency to suddenly appear? How many times have you promised to get more organized, only to realize at the end of the month that you'd spent on things you didn't even remember? This frustration generates a gigantic emotional impact. You start doubting your capabilities, blaming yourself, believing you weren't born for this. But is the problem truly with you? Or is it in the automatic system you follow without questioning? There's a classic example of someone whose life unraveled precisely because he never recognized he was trapped in a cycle of poor decisions. Nicolas Cage. At his peak, he earned over $150 million, a sum that seems impossible to deplete. But he followed a repetitive pattern of extremely expensive impulse spending, collecting homes, cars, rare items, and even castles. This behavior snowballed until he lost virtually everything. The point isn't the luxury, it's the pattern. A pattern you might replicate on a much smaller scale, but one that is equally destructive in your own reality. And for you to truly feel the force of this second danger, let me tell you a real case that, despite being well known, few people analyze deeply. In 2008, thousands of Americans lost their homes due to the housing crisis. But there is a specific, well-documented case that symbolizes what happens when you follow habits without questioning, that of a family named Howard. They believed that financing a larger house was proof they were winning at life. They didn't do anything morally wrong. They simply followed the pattern everyone else was following. But the installments increased, interest rates fluctuated, extra costs emerged, and before they knew it, the dream turned into a nightmare. They lost their home, moved into relatives' garage, and years later, gave emotional testimonies about how they hadn't seen the trap being built before their very eyes. This case resonates with many because it generates indignation and, at the same time, profound reflection. How many of your decisions also originated from a pattern that was never questioned? And this is where you arrive at an invisible crossroads. If you don't identify which inherited financial pattern is guiding your choices today, you risk living your entire life trying to fix the consequences of decisions that weren't even truly yours. And to break this cycle, you need to start small, but start consciously. That's why here's a powerful challenge. Not because it's difficult, but because it demands truth. For the next 5 days, write down everything you buy. Absolutely everything. It doesn't matter if it's a coffee, a subscription, a snack, an accessory, or any expense that seems insignificant. At the end of the 5 days, look at this list and ask the most important question. Do these expenses represent who I am, or do they represent who I was taught to be? This single question can dismantle patterns you've carried for years. And when you realize you're repeating habits that no longer make sense, you finally take the wheel of your own financial life. Suddenly, you stop being someone carried by the winds and become someone capable of choosing your own destiny. And this liberation, is the beginning of all the other profound changes you've always wanted to make. You might not have paused to consider this, but some purchases don't even register as purchases. These are promises you make to yourself through installments, automatic subscriptions, and contracts that stretch for years, gradually taking up space in your life until you realize you're no longer in control of your choices. You take on a monthly fee because it will make things easier, agree to a loan because you deserve it, accept a subscription because it's cheap per month. And years later, you realize these monthly cents have formed a chain that limits your options, ties down your plans, and silently erodes your freedom. Have you ever felt this sensation of being trapped by commitments you don't even remember why you accepted? The problem isn't just the isolated value of a single payment, it's the cumulative effect. A subscription costing $9 a month might seem irrelevant, but if you add up several subscriptions, monthly service fees, loan installments, and hidden costs, maintenance, insurance, additional charges, over 5 years, you could be committing thousands of dollars that could be used much more strategically. Before signing, you need to calculate the total cost, not in small-looking monthly installments, but in total dollars over 3, 5, and 10 years. When you do this calculation honestly, many decisions take on a different perspective. Perhaps you've already felt that sinking feeling in your stomach when adding everything up and seeing that the number is much larger than you imagined. It's a shock that, however uncomfortable, is extremely valuable, because the shock is what pulls you out of autopilot. To make this practical, here's a step-by-step example. If you think a subscription for $15 a month is cheap, multiply it by 12 and then by 5. $15 multiplied by 12 equals $180 a year. $180 multiplied by 5 equals $900 over 5 years. Now add 3 more subscriptions of that kind and a few installments from a small loan of $120 a month. Over 5 years, this easily turns into $4,000 to $6,000 committed. Money that could have been invested, saved for a significant goal, or used to reduce high-interest debt. This kind of trap has brought down people who seemed untouchable. Remember the case of MC Hammer? At the peak of his career, he had a massive payroll and commitments that consumed his monthly income. It wasn't one exorbitant purchase. It was contracts, salaries, and fixed expenses that grew into unsustainable debt. The result was bankruptcy and loss of freedom. The lesson is clear. When you accept recurring obligations without gauging the future impact, you're unknowingly selling off a piece of your life. Now imagine your routine with fewer constraints. Imagine reviewing each recurring commitment and asking yourself, does this still align with my plans for 1, 3, and 5 years from now? If the answer is uncertain, you have permission to decline. What's more, you have an obligation to protect your financial freedom. A practical and simple step you can start today is to take inventory of your recurring expenses. List everything that automatically debits from your card or checking account. Then, for each item, write down how much it will cost over 5 years, in dollars. When you see the numbers, you'll understand why so many people feel financially trapped without being able to pinpoint exactly what went wrong. I also want you to consider the emotional consequences. Financial commitments generate stress, loss of options, and anxiety about the future. These emotions alter your behavior. You start refusing opportunities, avoiding calculated risks, accepting jobs or decisions that don't align with your dreams just because the payments need to be made. It's a discreet prison. Liberation begins when you recognize that every contract is a promise to the future that needs to be made responsibly. To make this applicable now, here's a concrete exercise that will give you immediate clarity. Take your last 3 bank statements or card bills and underline all recurring items. Calculate the monthly total and then multiply by 60 to get to 5 years. If the total surprises you, excellent. Surprise is the first step toward transformation. Decide today to cancel or renegotiate at least one of these expenses whose cost over 5 years you consider unjustifiable. Ask for a discount, cancel subscriptions you don't use, reevaluate loans, and look for alternatives with less impact. And for this to become real change, I propose a challenge. For the next 8 weeks, don't sign up for anything new that generates automatic debits without first calculating the cost over the next 5 years. Instead, direct at least 20% of that potential future expense into a savings or investment account. At the end of 8 weeks, you'll have a new feeling, less burden, more options. And this feeling is powerful. It gives you back choices, and with them, the ability to build a life aligned with your goals. It's not about living without pleasure. It's about deciding which pleasures are truly worth compromising your freedom for. When you learn to measure the real cost of commitments, you stop selling your tomorrow for momentary relief today. And that in itself changes everything. You may never have realized that the most expensive purchase you can make doesn't appear on a statement. It's what you fail to invest in yourself. While you hesitate to spend $30 on a book or $150 on a course that could open doors, many people spend hundreds on fleeting items that change nothing. And this choice, refusing knowledge out of fear of immediate expense, traps you in a cycle of small stagnations that, when combined, determine where you'll be 5 years from now. When you decide not to learn, you're betting against your future. Ask yourself, how many times have you chosen something that provided immediate relief instead of something that required patience and would yield returns later? Buying a piece of clothing for $80 might make you feel good for 1 week. A book for $20 could change your way of thinking for years. It's a difference in time frame and real value that many people ignore because the reward of consumption is instant and the benefit of knowledge takes time to emerge. There's a clear pattern among people who have managed to turn their fortunes around. They transformed curiosity into a habit. Think of someone like Elon Musk. Before leading major industries, he devoured books on physics, engineering, and business, often teaching himself what formal schools didn't. This isn't luck. It's deliberate investment in capability. When you learn to view spending on education as capital, not an expense, your relationship with money changes. But there's also the other side, those who ignore this principle and pay the price. Think of companies and leaders who failed to keep up. Many of these cases seem minor at first. They turned down a course, ignored data, put it off until tomorrow. And tomorrow arrived with technology, competition, and a market that doesn't wait. You don't need to be big to suffer this effect. Even small knowledge gaps can cost thousands of dollars in lost opportunities. To turn this into real practice, start with concrete steps. Set aside a fixed portion of your income for learning. Don't put it off. If $50 seems little, turn that into $5 a week and choose a book or a micro course. Compare. Spending $5 a week on learning is $260 a year, and the return in career prospects is incalculable. Another practical action is to replace an impulse purchase with knowledge. When you think about spending $60 on a consumer item, assess whether a $60 course or 3 $20 books wouldn't yield more return in the medium term. You need a simple and sustainable routine. Set aside 30 minutes a day to study something that expands your ability to earn or save money. Personal finance, technical skills, communication. Create a log. Note what you studied, what applicable idea you gleaned, and how you plan to use it the following week. This small habit transforms knowledge into action, and action is where real value happens. It's also important to apply knowledge immediately. If you read about financial organization, implement a budget the same week. If you learn a negotiation technique, use it on your next significant purchase. Learning without applying becomes mere intellectual comfort. Applying without learning becomes trial and error. The combination is what accelerates results. To create urgency and transform theory into change, I propose a practical challenge. For 30 days, every time you feel the urge to make an impulse purchase, you buy knowledge equivalent to that value, or if you prefer, divide that value and apply half to learning and half to savings. At the end of the 30 days, create a simple report: how much you spent, what you learned, what practical application you made, and what result it brought, even if small. You'll be surprised how this exchange changes your perception of value and, consequently, your financial behavior. There's also an emotional dimension that cannot be ignored. Learning builds self-esteem, autonomy, and resilience. People who invest in themselves tend to report more satisfaction and less anxiety regarding money because they feel they control their possibilities. This psychological effect is part of the return on investment in knowledge. It's not just about earning more, it's about feeling more capable in the face of adversity. For you to start now, here are immediate and clear applications. Choose a concrete problem that bothers you today: organizing debts, improving income, changing careers. Research a book or course that deals specifically with that problem, not something generic. Set a 14-day deadline for studying and a practical action to execute on day 15. Mark this action on your calendar and follow through. If the course costs $100, think not about the price, but about what you will achieve over the next 12 months with that newfound capability. If it helps you increase your income by $50 per month, in 2 years you'll already have earned more than your initial investment. Finally, remember that investing in knowledge doesn't have to be expensive or grand. It's about being consistent and deliberate. By exchanging impulsive spending for structured learning, you not only protect your money, but also build a future where decisions are made with greater clarity and less regret. And when this becomes a habit, you will have created a silent competitive advantage, something no one can take away from you, and that, over time, translates into true financial freedom. And before you go about your day, take a moment to think of someone who could benefit from these ideas as much as you. There's always someone close to you who is trying to organize their financial life, facing doubts, insecurities, or unknowingly repeating habits that sabotage their own future. Sharing this video with them might be exactly what was missing to unlock real change. Thank you for being here, for dedicating your time and attention to something that can transform your relationship with money and your own story. I look forward to seeing you in the next video. And until then, keep choosing paths that expand, not limit, your life.